Really excited to be here. How?
Happy Hallows Eve.
Yes, happy Hallows Eve. I'm really excited. I was just telling Alexis how this Halloween season, it's been great. And I've been really like my favorite part of this season has really been the nature, just seeing how everything's been so beautiful. Whatever the climate was this year, I think I'm not even going to get into that because I'm not an expert, but it was ideal for like the changing of the colors and the leaves and just how everything's been showing up. And it's just a picturesque autumn season. And so I've been enjoying that, but I feel a little low on the Halloween spirit. Like I feel it inside, but something isn't like clicking, you know, like it should be. And I feel like I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Halloween already. I need another week,
Yeah,
like get to where I need to be for Halloween, but that's okay. Like
I
it,
feel the same way.
yeah.
And like we were talking about before, like this year's been a weird year. A lot has been going on. And then it's election year, so the like general consensus is like stress. So I feel like all of us have kind of been like, even if you're not super into politics, the energy's flowing. That it's just that type of energy flowing. So I 100% agree with you on that. I feel similarly where like I really want to feel more intensely Halloweeny, but it's just
A lot going on.
yeah, it's a lot going on. A lot going on. I think this year was so busy. I mean, we were just talking about before how I can't believe that this is our first Halloween as friends. The
Yeah.
last year to me has felt like years, and that goes hand in hand with like our friendship and the way we work together. Like it feels like years.
Yeah. Like we were picking up from where we left off, like, from lifetimes, I'm sure.
Yes. Do
Okay.
you so what okay. So what is going on in the outer
Yeah. Like
sphere of it all? Give us some of your insight on what's going on. I
yeah.
think it could be really helpful not only to me, but the people around too who are feeling similarly.
Yeah. So we are recording this. We're live and recording this podcast episode on October 30th of 2024. Just throwing that out there. And so it's the night before Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole week though, I feel like Halloween it's already the energy of like the veil being thin, right? Like
Yeah.
death being near, ancestors being near, like our shadows are, the nights are, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, the nights are they're longer, right? Or, yeah, so the daylights are shortening and the nighttime hours are a bit longer. And so there's already this like sometimes uncomfortable vibe just in the feeling and experience of change in general. And with this particular season, this week specifically, Mars and Pluto are in opposition, and they will make an exact opposition on November 3rd, right? Sunday, right? So the last day of the week. And what an opposition is essentially is what it sounds like. It's basically a connection between two planets or like the sun and moon in which there is opposing energies and they're both like it's almost like you can experience the extremes of the energies, right? And they have these extreme opposite perspectives or energies or intentions, and so they're coming together in connection. And it's basically, the way I look at it is like it's a balancing experience in the sense of like nature is coming through to like neutralize the energy. So wherever you're experiencing extremes in your life, this is the time, considering Mars and Pluto. So Mars and Pluto both are like the power planets, right? There's power dynamics, there's like intensity and like I was gonna say rage on Mars's, and with Pluto, it's that kind of like that fear factor and like going deep and like the shadow and just like, revealing like things that you don't want to, really face. And so both of these energies, both of these planets are in opposition, kind of expressing their extreme energies with this connection. And this experience is essentially bringing us to the middle to kind of like move away and release the extremes. On one end with Pluto, it's guiding us to face what we've been suppressing for a long time. And with Mars, it's more so focused on our like willpower, our determination, our independence, and just our kind of like fighter spirit. And Mars is then, just to take it a bit deeper, Mars is in Cancer. So there's a lot of emotions and protective energy around like the independence, the freedom, like your like willpower and your passion and your drive. And Pluto is in Capricorn. And when we think about Capricorn, Capricorn's protective as well, in a sense of like things going a certain way and being a certain like a method. And so Pluto's like, no, we're going to transform that. We're going to break it down. That has to die so something else can come, forward. And the way that Pluto does is through like uncovering something within the dark, right? In the case of your unconscious. So all that's happening this week. And whenever there's a connection like that and you're coming up to an exact alignment of that, or an exact opposition in this case, it gets stronger as it gets closer and closer to that exact alignment, to the degree. So all of this week, where the energy's building up to that opposition. On top of that, we have a new moon in Scorpio, which already, and Mars and Pluto are Scorpio's like rulers, right?
Yep.
Traditional. And so it's like that energy between Mars has a lot of influence over this with this new moon with Scorpio season. So it's like, holy shit, there's a lot going on. And the moon's not even in Scorpio yet. Like I had to check because I'm in a whole place right now, physically and also emotionally and mentally. And I had to check and I'm like, damn, the moon's not even in Scorpio yet. And I'm feeling
I
like,
know. I
so
almost feel like I almost feel like the Pluto and the Mars opposition too feels like the light and shadow self kind of learning to merge together. Pluto being of the unconscious, and when I think of Mars, I think of outward energy. So
yeah,
it's kind of interesting the way that the light and the dark are kind of merging, and that's we're probably feeling, I'm sure, that already so intensely, and the sun already being in Scorpio, being so like intense with that energy.
yeah. So it's like, I think, and there's some stuff happening with Mercury too. And it's like, thinking about, you want to also think about where Cancer and Capricorn are in your birth chart, because that'll definitely give you more understanding of, where this might be playing out, more dominantly, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, Cancer is the planet that, rules emotions and intuition and, of course, dreams. So I've been asking a lot of people recently, like, how's your dream space? Like, what's going on? And
Yep.
people, I mean, for weeks now, people have been having a lot of dreams. And I wouldn't be surprised, if this week in particular, the dreams have been turned up. I mean, I've had a couple people reach out to me, sharing just nightmare-esque type dreams. So it was really on point that we decided to talk about this tonight.
Yeah, the dream space has been very interesting. I don't know if it applies because you and I both have Scorpio in our first house. So
Mhm.
I feel like that is being emphasized with the sun and soon to be the moon as well. But in general, almost everybody I know have been going back and forth between having either nightmares or anxiety driven dreams and normal or fun dreams, playful dreams. And it kind of just goes back to that Pluto Mars opposition. It just feels like, oh, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, there's extremes. So yeah, we're here tonight to talk about nightmares. I'm really
Yes,
excited.
we are.
A lot to discuss. I know we're not going to get to all of it. So there will definitely be more episodes to come. So, all right, everyone, please bear with me. I have an intense cold right now. And so, yeah, just bear with me. But I'm here and I'm ready to go. How are you feeling, Alexis?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling ready to go. I'm feeling excited for the topic. And now that we're sitting here, I feel like the energy is really coming through.
Yeah.
Like my energy levels have just like gone up and out, and I'm excited and ready to talk.
And so, just to let you all know, at the end, towards the end of this episode, we're going to each pull an oracle card to see what message is going to come through for us for the Scorpio new moon, and maybe we'll see what comes forth, because it might be, I wouldn't be surprised if the message that we receive is in alignment with our discussion tonight, because that's how it always goes.
It always goes that way.
It out unfolds. But so we're going to talk about nightmares. And we wanted to kind of focus on the myths of nightmares, and also how nightmares are, in fact, beneficial. And I could say from my own personal experience, they have been the most transformative, most talk about shadow work. Like, this is literally the shadow work. Like, I
Literally.
about, I like, yes, I'm gonna stare in an obsidian mirror and call forth my shadow self and sit with it and see what comes through. That's something I've done before. And that
Mm-hmm.
works, but nobody knows you better than your psyche, and tell you everything.
Yes,
And
they do.
there's is there that's where the juice is. That's where the power is. So I'm so excited to talk about the benefits of nightmares, and to share our own experience in nightmares. And so the main myth that we want to focus on tonight is how it's said that nightmares are, they are not real. Like, it's a myth. There's a saying out there that it's not necessarily something you want to pay attention to. Personally, I've mostly come across, people that do dream work, they know that nightmares are extremely valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But it's mostly, I feel, for people who haven't really had a lot of experience with dream work, and also people who have recurring nightmares, really intense nightmares. It's easy to want to believe that it's not true. And when
Yeah.
you shy away from them, or, just try to like push them aside, and you don't sit with them, that you don't realize the opportunity that you're missing, as far as like the healing and transformation from that.
Absolutely. You don't want to ignore these messages. I mean, there's a reason why they're coming up. The more you avoid them, the more they're intense they're going to get.
So Alexis and I are both going to be sourcing or referring to, we have two books that we think are really good that we recommend. So, and I will put the names of these books and the author in the description of the video. So, I really love this book called The Art of Transforming Nightmares, and she focuses on harnessing the creative and healing power of bad dreams, sleep paralysis, and recurring nightmares. And she gives really good practices and techniques for working with nightmares and, yeah, bad dreams, anxious dreams, and sleep paralysis. And her name is Clare R. Johnson, and she's PhD.
And the book source that I'm using today is called Nightmares, The Dark Side of Dreams and Dreaming by Stacey Michaels. I highly recommend it. It's written in a really palatable way. It breaks down things really well. What are nightmares? How do they compare to dreams? She really goes into the depth of how to break down your nightmares and how to kind of pull it out of like an emotional state, kind of like put it more towards a logical or reason based state. So, like breaking down each aspect of the nightmare to figure out what's going on and creating like that distance from it emotionally, by basically being able to apply your logic of your experience to it. It's a great one. I definitely highly recommend it.
Yeah. So I guess we can start by kind of sharing our own personal, I guess, perspective and maybe experience with nightmares. Because one of the really interesting points that was made in the book, or I don't know if she said this exactly, but I thought about it in the sense of, so when we think about nightmares, and the way one of her definitions of nightmares in this book is that nightmares are red flags that point to the areas within our psyche that need healing. And so as I was reading through the book, she expressed, which I feel most of us know, that our dreams and of course our nightmares are very unique and specific to us. So what I might share with you as far as a nightmare, especially recently that I had, and I don't know at this point if I would call it a nightmare, but it was a branch off of nightmares I've had in the past. You will probably, you'll hear it and be like, that's not scary. And on the flip side, I've heard Alexis share stories with me about her dreams. And I'm like, wait, this wasn't a nightmare, right? Like, I want to make sure that shit sounded scary as hell.
Yep.
And so I thought it was really interesting because I've talked to other people who've done dream work for years, especially lucid dreaming. And it takes a lot to scare people who, like, in the dreams, it takes a lot for them to have nightmares essentially, because they're already kind of empowered in their dream space because they've been doing it for so long. They, have been a lucid dreamer for years, probably decades. Alexa's a perfect example. And so when it comes to nightmares, like, I feel like it doesn't have to get to that point of like the fear factor of a nightmare, because you're already consistently in your dream space and very present with your dreams, that you're already kind of on it. And that's one of the things with nightmares, is that it's like, it's really your psyche being like, hey, hello, pay attention to this. This is important. You're ignoring it. And there's a sense of urgency now. We have to turn up the fear factor so you don't forget it. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. I think it's really interesting because when you've been lucid dreaming or practicing dream work for a while, um, specifically lucid dreaming, you know that you're dreaming when you're in the dream. So right off the bat, you know that what's happening isn't real. So you kind of go, or not in, it's not real in the sense of being in the waking realm. And so you kind of already have one foot grounded because you know that you can wake up. And I think that's something that's really important. And another reason why, especially if you have consistent nightmares, um, why it would be good for you to learn how to lucid dream so you can kind of take the power back within yourself in this nightmare and learn from it rather than avoiding it, being afraid of it, and running away from it. Um, One of the definitions in my book that, well, not my book, but the book that I sourced these from that I liked was comparing nightmares to a Halloween party may sound crazy, yet it parallels what is true. Most of the time, a nightmare is a dream dressed as a scary costume. And I
Mhm.
think that's really, really like a cute way of putting it because one, it's tomorrow's Samhain, it's All Hallows Eve. We're just about there. And so comparing it right to Halloween party is just fun, but it's also palatable and easy to understand. It is a dream that is dressed up. And something else she said about the dream too is that, you know, nightmares, it's really interesting. So she mentions that there is no such thing basically as a fearful dream, only dreamers in fear, something along the lines of that. So, like, the nightmare isn't actually the scary thing. You're scared within the dream, you're
Yeah.
scared within the nightmare.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. And my experience with nightmares as well has been very profound and has pushed me to understand myself in this existence just so much more intensely, even if the experience is not great, it
Mhm.
leads to better, it leads to better experiences.
Yeah. I really, really like that. Like there's a fearful dreamer, not that fear, like the fearful dream, right? I'm
Yeah.
sure I didn't say that correctly, but I really resonate with that. And so I'm gonna have to get that book because both of these books just I can see them working really well together because one of the parts of this book that really stood out to me, the Transforming Nightmares, was that she mentioned, like, firstly, of course, we all know the best and first step of all of this is to have a dream journal. She even mentioned a nightmare journal. So, I mean, if you're having tons of nightmares, then yes. And that is a really, like, just writing your nightmares in general. There was a time, actually, this time last year, and I actually cannot remember the nightmare. I feel like it had something to do with teeth, and I was having dental work that needed to be done. So I kind of remember it. And I was in the midst of facilitating a dream circle, and I could not write that. Like, I can write it down. And I was doing a really good job. And it was probably, I think, like three dreams in this same like theme, in the same, like within the same time frame, three nightmares. And I literally came to, it was like in the middle of the dream circle as the facilitator and the host. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm going to be transparent and honest. Like, I have not been writing my dreams. And it was a discussion and I shared, why. And it's really hard to write and relive it. And what I'll say is that when you write it, and I knew this, so I knew I had to write it. So eventually I did, but it's like I knew if I wrote that dream, just putting it on paper, I kind of lessened its power over me. And it was like almost like I'm basically facing that fear, right? By
Oh
seeing
yeah.
it. And
Taking the power back.
taking your power back, that's the first step. So what I really liked in this book is, she mentioned writing your dreams, consistently, of course. And when you write your dreams and you have like a nice, journal or log of dreams, go back and pay attention. Look at your dreams, especially the nightmares, if you have any nightmares or anxious dreams. But in general, look at who your dreaming self is. Like, who are you in your dreams? Like, do you feel empowered? Like Alexis, I was thinking of you. I was like comparing us, and I was like, man, Alexis is so empowered in her dreams. And I'm just like, I have my moments, like I wax and wane, and I have not been doing the intentional dream work for a long time. And so it makes sense. And I'm really excited to see where I'll be in like 3 years, right? Or 5 years. And so, yeah, one of the things she was like, you know, reflect on your dreaming self. Who is your dreaming self? How do you act, react, and reflect in your dream space? And do you feel that you're an empowered dreamer? And also, when you're looking at, especially when it comes to nightmares, like what's the recurring theme? What kind of situations do you often find yourself in? And just, I think when you start to look at it like that, especially if, you're having a hard time really understanding the source of like the nightmare, so to speak, you're like, what is it trying to tell me? What's out of balance? I feel like a lot of the times we might know, but sometimes you don't. And so if you are looking at, if you're able to write those dreams, and you're able to look at who you are in the current theme and the situation, of course, paying attention to the emotions, there's so much within that you get, and you see how that parallels or is an opposite of, who you are in your waking life.
Absolutely. I think one of the things too that is really interesting is that most of the time, and this is kind of just bouncing off what you were saying, most of the time nightmares come from the inner or higher self, which is usually filled with like in that shadow realm, like ignored traumas and fears that need attention that you've been putting off.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some interesting ways, like going off of what you were just saying, that you can pay attention to, interesting things you can pay attention to when you're kind of decoding that theme of your nightmare. So, like paying attention to the dream symbols. looking at several references to help you figure out what those dream symbols mean to you, because no dream symbol means the same thing to each person. And I think that's really, really important to emphasize, because some people would prefer not to use references when it comes to dream symbols. But I think that dictionaries and whatnot like that, even if they don't give you the exact thing that you're looking for, it absolutely will help you get to where you need to be.
It definitely gets,
Label,
like, the ideas flowing.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
oh,
It gets the ideas flowing. So it may not be that definition that is correct for you, but it'll lead you to what's correct for you.
yeah.
um, Labeling the feelings of your unconscious and conscious. So while you're in the nightmare, all of the feelings, not just emotional, but physical too. What's around you? Is it hot? Is it cold? Are you feeling pain? Are you not feeling pain? Are you feeling intense fear when you wake up too? Or does it dissipate? That's really important to navigate through. If you can figure out the location that you're in the dream, write that down. Pay attention to the dream characters and how they may relate to your waking life. If they're people you know, if they're dream people, how they approach you, how you approach them. Um, and the last thing that I thought was really interesting that she mentions as a tip for helping you decode these nightmares is look for hints at the end of the nightmare. So, how does your nightmare end? What changes? What stays the same? What is that image right before your eyes open and you're waking up? And I loved that whole list of what to look for when decoding your nightmares, because I think it can get very abstract
Yeah.
and it can be very difficult, especially if you don't do dream work often, or you're somebody who hasn't navigated deeply into the realm of shadow work. You know, these things can feel very confusing. You may see it as a literal thing when you really need to figure out what it means figuratively or metaphorically for you. And it might even bring up, you know, this is something that's really important to acknowledge too, is nightmares can be extremely traumatic. I would say that most nightmares are traumatic. And it's really, really important that you discuss these nightmares with maybe an outside source as well, you know, whether it's somebody who is interested in dreams, a professional dream worker, or even your therapist. You know, deep psychology goes into dream work and nightmares. And if you're having things come to the surface, traumas that were too difficult to face when they were happening and too difficult to face now, like, find support, because that is something that is so important, and you're not alone with these things, and it can be very difficult to navigate by yourself.
Yeah. I really like that, paying attention to what happens at the end of the nightmare, because a lot of the times, like, we wake up from that ending, or like from that last point, like something happens where it's like, I can't take anymore. And then you wake yourself out of it, or
Yep.
you just wake up naturally. And so I want to just share my example. Like, actually, I had what is not necessarily, it's not necessarily a nightmare now. I feel it has transitioned to an anxious dream, but before it was a nightmare, and it was an experience that kept me from the dream work essentially. And it was basically not being able to, in my waking life, I have been unable to process the loss of my grandmother that happened in 2005. And I literally blocked it out, to the sense of, like, I couldn't look at a picture of her. I didn't want to talk about her. And this was probably the most important person to me in my life. Like, she was my mother, and she still, to me, she still is mother. And so it was, yeah, it took a really long time. And it wasn't really until I started doing this dream work. Well, before that, I was really, talk about having to face your fears. I was living with my mother for 6 months in, like, my mom's house. You guys have probably already heard me talk about this, but basically being there, it's like I am surrounded by everything that is my grandmother's, even like her spirit is like, and
Mm-hmm.
it's heavy. And so I didn't really think about it until I was there for some time. And my daughter at the time was 2, turning 3. And she knew, like, my mom has 2 pictures on her end tables in her living room of my grandmother. And my daughter at times would sit with the picture and like laugh and giggle. And it was like freaked me out. And I was like, what? Or sometimes she would, there was also an angel figure by my grandmother's picture. And she would turn the picture so it would be face down so she couldn't see my grandmother's face. And she would turn the angel down, or she would put the angel face down. And then after a while, I asked my mom, I was like, was that grandma's angel? And she was like, yeah. And then my daughter's father came over to visit, and he was like, after he had left and everything, he was like, oh yeah, your grandmother's hanging out around that angel. And I was like, oh, chills. But anyways, my point is I was immersed in that environment and in like facing my fear. So after that, I had already kind of healed just a bit of that trauma. And then a couple months after that, when I returned to New York, when I returned home, I like started doing the dream work. So, anyways, a big part of not wanting to do the dream work was because my grandmother would come to me in dreams like years and years for years. And those were always nightmares. I would wake myself out of it. I'd be in anxiety. I'd be really sad. And then I just like block it out. And so that, like I said, that's been going on for like she's been gone for 20 years. So this week, and I've been doing a lot of work, and I love when she visits me in my dreams, but I don't know what it is, like maybe because I haven't connected with her in so long, that this week, and of course the ancestors are close, the veil is thin, all of those things. This week I had a dream, and I just remember the scene. And of course, this happened all right before I woke up. But my daughter and I were sitting out front of our house and like on the sidewalk in front of the front yard. And we were like playing with like looking at bugs or whatever we usually do when we're sitting outside. And I heard my neighbor's door close. And in waking life, my neighbor, she's out of town. So she's been out of town for like 2 weeks. And she always tells us when she goes out of town so we can watch over our house. So in the dream, I was like, okay, my neighbor, I was like, she's out of town. She's not home. Like, who's coming out of her house? So I turned and looked, and it was my grandmother coming out of her house. And like, even right now, I have chills. And I was like, oh, no. Like that same feeling came up from the past when she would come in my dreams. And she was coming. And then I kind of looked at my daughter and I was like, we got to go inside. Like, we got to get out of here. So I was in that, flight mode. And I looked back over at the house, and the house was actually the house that my grandmother and my grandfather had when I lived with them when I was little. And she was coming down the stairs, and it was like it was far away, like distant, as I was watching it as an observer. I was watching a scene, and she was like kind of rushing down the stairs in haste to catch up with myself. Like it was like a 5-year-old me. And it was like I'm about to have tears right now because it was literally like I knew it was a memory.
Mm-hmm.
Still in fear, and I was like running towards the door with my daughter in my hand. And then as I was watching my grandmother kind of like, walking quickly after my younger self, there was like a guy or a man or something like walking up to my yard, and he was holding a book. And I looked at the book and it said nursery rhymes. And I was like, okay. And so then I'm still walking in the house with haste. I don't know why it's taking so long. And then I was like, grandma, grandma. And like it was a whole different scene. So she wasn't responding. And then I heard a faint hi. And then I woke up. And in the dream, it was the same, not as intense, not as heavy, but it was the same fear from previous dreams. But when I woke up, I was like a little afraid. It was weird. It was weird. It like that feeling kind of carried out of the dream. And I had some other things going on like in my space energetically where I was like, okay, you're here. And so I felt a little uneasy. But quickly after that, I was really upset with myself for acting that way in the dream. And then also I was really like, I was sad. I was like, no, I wanted to connect with her again in the dream. And I haven't, like, she hasn't come back because I even came to my altar and like talked to her with the pendulum to see if that was her. She was here, and I was like, I want to connect again. And she hasn't been back in my dream, so we'll see. It's almost Halloween, so
Oh, no,
yeah.
you have to mention too about the black shadow cat.
Yeah, so in the last episode that we did on Insidious, I mentioned a shadow cat that I've been seeing in my home. And we were talking about it possibly being a projection of my actual black cat because she was sleeping. And I never like I see her and I know she's in places and then I see this other shadow. So I speculate that I believe it's my grandmother's her spirit like there as a cat, because when I was having that dream and it was the same night because she was in another dream or she was in my mind or she was definitely present, right? And I felt like my cat jump up on the bed, which I thought was my cat, but there was no cat there. And
Mm-hmm.
then I went to sleep and I had this dream, and then I woke up out of the dream and I'm sitting there and I'm, kind of just like in that in between. And I'm like looking because my bed is not necessarily like, it's like I can see through the doorway into the hallway. And then my door was like cracked. It was closed, but like cracked open a little bit. So I was like looking down the hallway and there was like the candlelight in my room going. And so like I saw that what I thought was a shadow cat. And then at another point in the night, like I was hearing the purring and everything. And I was like, what? And I was like, yeah, yeah. And I just had this intuitive feeling. I was like, okay, is this my grandmother? Because my grandmother was the one who introduced me to ancient Egypt, like just through like film and art and all of that stuff and just documentaries and whatnot. And so I know she has a connection and she's a scribe herself. And we used to watch like animal and like wild cats and all of that stuff. So I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if this is her being around as a cat. That would make me more comfortable because I was saying if I was to see an apparition of her, I'd be done.
Yeah. And you asked
There,
her
yeah.
the pendulum. You
And I did
asked her
the
using the
pendulum next
pendulum.
morning. That was a part of it too. And I asked if she was a shadow cat, and I got a yes. So
I love that. It adds another layer of protection to
yeah,
like your
yeah,
essence, because that's like you said, it's somebody extremely important to you. And I wonder too if like that fear stems from just a fear of like vulnerability, because those the feelings of losing someone close to you are so painful that you don't want to experience it again.
yeah,
So it's almost like you're protecting yourself from interacting with her more because you're so fearful of almost having to lose her again.
yeah,
That's like what I get from that. Obviously you could be feeling completely different, but it reminded me of how like intensely fearful you get of losing people once you realize
yeah. That's
how painful it is, you know?
And I've been thinking a lot about my childhood and how I don't remember a lot of it. And I know that there was some traumatic things that were happening that I don't remember,
Mm-hmm.
um, in my grandmother's home. So like I know I was like thinking about that and I was wanting to remember more. So I thought it was interesting that that was shared with me. And I did ask the pendulum that too, like connecting with my grandmother through the pendulum. And I was saying, were you showcasing a childhood memory? And was the intention to help me to heal these wounds? And it was yes, yes. I mean, I was
I
asking other
love
questions that I got no's for because I was like, do you have a message for me? And it was a no. And I'm like, okay, are you a spirit guide for me then? Like, what are you doing?
that.
But,
Well, she was her showing up was the message. She doesn't
right.
have a message because
The dream
she
was
is the message.
right, right. In the dream, it was already there. So yeah, but what I wanted to point out to that is like the transition, of that in which that was a nightmare. And it was like I still had this like fear factor in the dream of like, I gotta get out of here, but it's not as heavy. And I know it's because I've been doing the dream work, facing
Mm-hmm.
the dreams, and then also facing it in waking life. I hate saying real life, in waking life, and I definitely see the difference. So I thought that was awesome. The book really, the book that you mentioned, as far as like paying attention to what's happening right before you wake up and like what changes, like how does this? Because I was just chilling playing with my daughter, and then it took a turn, right? And then
Yeah.
also thinking about my dreaming self, how I'm so like weak in my dreams, I feel, but like I feel I'm definitely stronger. I've definitely done a lot of work in the waking life. But
I
the
don't
dream,
feel like you're weak in your dreams. I feel like your lucidity waves,
yeah,
you
it does.
know? Because that's the thing I've learned over the years. It's like people say that, some people will claim that lucid dreaming is, you know, when you, like, I've had people tell me, oh, well, you're not a lucid dreamer because you can't have nightmares if you lucid dream. You can just choose to change it. But that's not what lucid dreaming really is. You can wave through your different like levels of awareness within your lucidity. So you can, like, I've had nightmares where like in the moment I couldn't make an active choice, but immediately I come back to like full control of my lucidity and I can run away, and like there's aspects of nightmares that I think you're still lucid in different ways. And I don't think that your dream self has been weak, but I do think that you have a level of control within yourself because you don't want to face certain things. It's that diving deeper and integrating with your shadow, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult. And you don't really even realize how emotionally and mentally taxing and spiritually taxing it is to integrate your shadow. And it's also a never-ending process. Like,
Yeah, I was like, oh, I thought I dealt with this. Why am I acting this way? So there's definitely something there, and I'm like going deeper with it. Like I'm like, okay, what is it about this, like the childhood? Because it's like it's if she appeared in other, like she's appeared in other ways, and it has been awkward, but not like that
mhm.
old feeling. So I'm like, ooh, what's going on here? So I'm sure I'll have, more dreams.
Well, and what was weird when you were telling me about that dream too was I remember you telling me about a dream where a man was in your yard with a nursery rhymes book.
Yeah. I don't
Like,
remember. Like
I
I
literally was like, didn't you tell me this already? Because that part of the dream, I swear I've experienced secondhand.
Yeah, that's crazy because I don't recall ever. Like I can look through the dream journals, but I think it's like we were saying, it was just a deja vu moment. Like you blew my mind when you said that. I was like, what?
Well, because it's something that's so obscure and so weird. And for me to actually have a memory of something that you didn't tell me, or
Yeah.
maybe like you'll scrub through, excuse me, I'm sorry. You'll scrub through your dream journals and you'll find it and you'll be like, holy crap,
Yeah.
like this
Definitely,
was,
I'm definitely gonna do that.
I'm sorry, I just got like
I
a,
know I know as long as we've been friends, it hasn't been very long, surprisingly. So
it
it's like
feels like very long.
manageable to like, I know, to go through, you know, those dreams. So yeah.
Absolutely.
So I will definitely report back.
Yes, please.
I have some work to do.
Don't we all? So if you don't mind, I'll go right into sharing my nightmare experience. And I'm going to share an older one that I've had. Um, because of the severity of the fear, like we had just talked about. I don't experience a whole lot of fear like intensely anymore when I have dreams. They're more anxiety driven dreams than they are really fearful, scary dreams. Um, One of the most impactful horror, like nightmares that I've had in the past was I was in a hospital and I know I was going to visit my now husband, and I'm walking through the hospital hall and I'm walking a dog on a leash. Um, and the lights are kind of dim. It feels a little dark, a little eerie within this hospital floor. And as I'm going, I approach the elevator and I hit the button for it to open. And it opened and then it started to close again. And I noticed, and the reason it was closing so quickly is because I took a while to walk into it because I saw there was a gap like a foot gap between where the level of the floor was and where the elevator was. Now, if you've ever been on an elevator, which I'm sure most of you have, um, the drop is very, very far down, especially if you're on higher levels. And I was on a higher level in the stream. When the doors started to close because I took too long out of fear, one of the people in the elevator, I remember he was like a 25-year-old Asian man, longer hair, like polo and tan pants, like very like casual looking person, went to open the door for me to get on, and he fell through that gap, and I watched him fall to his death. And I
Wow.
felt paralyzed, and just because it feels so, it's so intense and it's so traumatizing. And I immediately left the building and went to my car. And I remember I was running with my dog through, like, because it was raining out. We were running through the street, like you could hear like the gravel under your feet with the mixture of the rain and everything. And I got into the car with my dog and I just sat there and took deep breaths until I woke up. And in that dream, where I was talking about the levels of lucidity, I was going in and out.
Yeah.
So, like, I was always lucid. I was always aware that it was a dream, but it was how much I was able to interact with the dream that changed. It
Yeah.
came in waves. And when I got to that elevator and I watched this person fall through, I felt so paralyzed by the experience that I couldn't stop thinking about it for like a week. I mean, I woke up from this experience feeling like I just watched somebody die.
Mm.
Like there, that connection of the experience in the dream and the experience in real life, it felt like it was just one. And I realize now that this experience was really representative of, at the time, my fear of moving forward with my life and making a decision to kind of like ascend further for myself, and my fears of doing the work of making the decisions, of getting things situated, and just having no confidence in my abilities. I felt like I was doomed. Like there was no passage onto the elevator to go up, to go to another higher level for myself. And watching this person die, I feel like it was a representation of my, what part of myself needed to die in order to get on this elevator. And it makes total sense that um the whole fight, fawn, and freeze, like I immediately was like, or fight, freeze, and flee. I immediately froze, didn't do anything, and then when I was able to, I ran away from the situation. And that's really, really something that I struggled with. I still struggle with it. But back then, it was more prevalent where like weeks and weeks were going by and I wasn't, like, it felt like I couldn't keep track of the time that was passing because I was so avoidant and dissociated and depressed and in my head and not moving forward. I was really stuck in my path. So that nightmare was really just a parallel of all the things that I had to face within myself, and like that fear of failure and success were really like balancing the scales so deeply that I wasn't moving.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm just thinking of just the nature of the elevator, where it's like you are moving, like, are you going down? Are you going up? Like the direction of where you're moving to, and just the elevator taking you to different floors or different places, or taking you somewhere essentially. And I know elevators represent, or just it's taking you from one state of consciousness to the next, as far as like what it can symbolize in dreams. like if you're thinking about a building or a home or a space that has different rooms, and if you're going to the basement, that's kind of seen as going more into like an unconscious
Mm-hmm.
space or place that's hidden. And if you are going, you know, to upper floors, it kind of is like, oh, you're expanding your consciousness or like ascending in some way or just moving into higher states of awareness. And so, but to just be in between, and it's like, hey, you arrive, this is where you're meant to be, and then you're just there. I mean, it just, yeah. But I can see how, and then witnessing the person falling and dying, it's like that's kind of a fear in itself, like a fear of failing, a fear of falling, and that, yeah, the fear of the unknown, all of that stuff in
Yeah,
one.
and it absolutely was the fear of the unknown. I mean, I was not on the elevator yet. I was standing to get on the elevator.
Oh, you
I
were.
could
Oh, okay.
yeah, I couldn't make the decision to get on, and I couldn't make the decision to go up or down. I It was basically like the risk. Like I couldn't make the decision to make a risk to go either direction, and the interesting thing too is like I've had cats and dogs, but I've always really connected on a different it's just different. Like cats and dogs just have different personalities, and there's a level of protection, but also like deep comfort that my dogs have always given me. Like my cat was an outside cat and he like did his thing and he
Yeah.
beat the shit out of other cats and then came back and would sleep on my head at night and it was like it was wonderful. But my
Yeah.
dog was always with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I almost feel like having a dog in my dream, which emulated my dog at the time, was a force of protection for me. And it
Yeah.
was like, you have the protection, now make the decision and we're going to go together. But I couldn't figure it out. I watched this person basically accidentally sacrifice themselves for a decision that I didn't even make. Like I wasn't even making anything. So it almost felt like his death was pointless. It was like a representation of the part of me that needed to die to make this decision, but it was also like this person was sacrificing themselves for me to stay still.
Yeah.
And then to run and hide in a place like a vehicle, and I was in the driver's seat. I just wasn't moving. It was a really interesting nightmare to have. And I'm telling you, like you would feel any trauma in real life, this is the trauma that I felt from that nightmare.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I'm listening, and I mean, yes, watching someone die is pretty intense for a dream, but I'm listening and it's really interesting. I can't say if that would scare me or not in my own, if it was in my own dream. But again, it just goes to the fact of like how everyone's nightmares, everyone's dreams are so unique to them, especially the symbolism and what environments you find yourself in, that it's just your consciousness knows exactly what is meant for you and how to help you. Like it's incredible.
Absolutely. And I concur on that because I've had dreams where I watch people die and it doesn't make a difference. I have no emotion towards it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll have to do another talk on this, specifically on how lucid dreams can help you to overcome nightmares. When I was facilitating the dream circle I did, solo, I had one participant and they came to the dream circle with a recurring nightmare that they really wanted to overcome. And I'm pretty sure we got them to the point of lucid dreaming and facing those. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's where we got them to, but facing, you know, the people in the dream, the what was going on, like facing the nightmare and not fleeing, but staying,
Yep.
right? Like basically doing the opposite. Like for me in my dream, the opposite would have been to try to engage with my grandmother instead of just running in the house or maybe engaging with a random person walking up to me in my yard. And so that was one of the things I'm like, if I have the dream again, and honestly, as I say this, if I have the dream again, I honestly don't know what I would do because it's still really intense for me. I think I would be more likely to approach the guy walking up to me with the nursery rhyme book versus like going to my grandmother, which it's a whole thing. And so, and I feel for you, the opposite thing you would have done is chosen, possibly, okay, where am I going? Maybe I can jump over this gap here.
Yep,
Like, you know what I mean? And so it's really interesting. And lucid dreaming gives you the power to do that. And I know I've seen all over the place in studies and, people sharing their experiences and my own, of course, that lucid dreams, it's kind of like one of the number one remedies of, transforming that nightmare, in addition
absolutely.
to talking about it, doing the dream work, outside of the dream space. And it's powerful.
I think too, something that's interesting is setting intention before, like if you have consistent nightmares, I feel like it would be really important to set intentions for how to manage this reoccurring nightmare. What do you want to do with like this horrifying thing? And it kind of makes me think to a couple different things. One, the what I had mentioned in the beginning about how like, fear distorts a dream message by forcing the characters to hide behind scary objects, which is why they, compare it to a Halloween party. And what that makes me think of is two different medias that highlight something that you could possibly use in a similar way. So there was one of the Freddy Krueger movies, one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I know there was like 8 of them. I think this one was like the 4th or the 5th one, but it's based in a children's hospital. And in order for them to beat this demon or whatever
Freddie Mercury.
Freddie
Nice.
Mercury.
Envision Freddie Mercury, not Freddie Krueger, and there you go.
Yes. So yeah, and it's like that's how they basically defeated this horror, was they imagined him as something hilarious. And that brings me back to my other example in Harry Potter, how they're taught how to transform the Dementors into something funny, or like what they're facing that's any of their biggest fears into something hilarious, so it eases their fear and they have control. And I feel like bringing humor into your dreamscape, setting that intention, especially when you get your grounding in lucid dreaming, like bringing humor into that can be very helpful with mitigating the situation, not solving the issue, but bringing it down to a level where you can continue to receive the message without the trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, our friend Jace, who was on an episode, or not recently, but 6 months ago during Beltane, it was actually the reflection of this episode. And we were talking about the veil being thin, but thinning towards, birth and renewal and life and all of those things. It was springtime. But that was one of the points, one of the first things he told me too, as far as nightmares, and especially with children, like my daughter, she doesn't really have nightmares. But if she was, or if you have a child, that was one of the things. It's like, okay, let's talk about your dream, your nightmare, and just envision, even with monsters, right? You can pretend that it's something scary, or something funny, not scary.
Imagine it's 10
yeah,
times more horrifying than what you're experiencing.
that's something that she was. I don't know if it was a monster, or maybe it was a dream, but I told her, I was like, just like when you see it again, just think of it, see it as like a big pile of poop. And she, because kids are into poop and all of that. So yeah, and that worked. I didn't hear anything else about it. So yeah, that's definitely on point. We have some comments here. Our friend Mary has joined in the chat and says,
"Hi, Mary."
And so Mary says, this share makes me question if being the 911 caller and a suicide I witnessed with a jumper on my way into work She's wondering, or it's making her think that if this was my woke death and resurrection of my own healing. This happened when she was sleeping. What, after all, what's woke? Sleep, dreaming, reality, all these reflections. So that witness, that experience was in the waking life. I remember you sharing that with me before, Mary. And yes, you're right. Like our waking life, our dream life, it's all entangled and intertwined. And I think it's definitely, again, it comes to your perception. Like
So
how
she had a dream about
the dream that actually happened.
it actually happened. Oh gosh. First of all, Mary, I am so, so sorry. So sorry you had to deal with that because that is intense.
Yeah. So yeah, that is that's really intense. And yeah, I mean it's definitely how you what you make of it, right? We
Yeah.
can be avoidant. And that's the thing, you don't have to go in full force. Like you want to go in these things, into these situations and these points of reflection and with very traumatic events with, maybe with help, with support.
Support for sure.
Therapist, like to be grounded, to feel safe. It's like there are really important things. So yes, we want to, face and sit with these things, but sometimes avoidance, or like maybe for lack of a better word, right? But just being, sometimes you need to not go there yet,
Yeah.
right? So I try not to make it a thing, but I think you'll know. And I think when you have nightmares, that is your like, hello, it's time. Like it's better for you to face this
Hmm.
and not.
And you'll know when you're ready to face it. I mean, even you talking about the dream you just had with your grandmother, even though you were in fear and planning to go into the house, you were still calling out. You were still present. Like you were still putting in an effort to connect. And that's not something that if you're truly, truly disconnected in fear and in that nightmare, you would normally do. So the fact,
That's major.
huge,
And after I
huge.
woke up, that is the first time I've ever did that. And when I was at my mother's house and I was feeling her energy around, and right before I left to come back to New York, I had started getting back into there was this workbook that I had called the Psychic Workbook that worked with opening up those energy centers, and they had these psychic practices that you would do. And it was really intense to start doing that at my mom's house. And I remember there was a point where Mary was like, hey, like you're comfortable with your tarot cards. Why don't you, connect with your grandmother through your tarot cards, or like write her a letter, which I got to the point where I could like talk to her picture, which is a big step. But as far as like through divination, that was intent. Like I wasn't there yet. And this, I was finally there, and it just happened. I felt safe. I felt clear, and I wanted to connect. So that was a big deal in waking life. So, maybe that dream, maybe since I didn't connect with her directly in the dream, it still kind of prompts me to connect in, waking life.
I mean, you did connect though. Like you did. It was very, very brief, but
Yeah.
you calling
Oh, I
out
did call
and
out.
yeah, and her saying hi towards the end, that was connection. Like that's where that bridge was. And it was so it's so telling of where you're at in your journey. Because it's such a big moment.
Yeah. Well, we are going to pull an oracle card. We're each going to pull an oracle card
Yep.
to get a message. Thank you for those of you showing up in the chat. R, I'm not familiar, like the letter R, just so you know, Alexis. There's a person that commented in the chat, I guess responding to Mary's comment with the sad, a crying face. And yeah, that seemed really traumatic of what Mary had to go through. And I'm so sorry you had to experience that. But thank you for showing up in the comments and sharing.
Yes,
And
thank you.
if you who are ever watching us live, we love to hear your shares, your questions, your thoughts. Just say hi in the chat. We love engaging with you all. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video. And before we pull any oracle cards. Alexis, do you have anything else you want to add to the conversation, to the
I
topic?
definitely feel like this topic needs another episode, if I'm being honest, because I feel like there's so much that we didn't get to talk about, and which is normal. Like you and I could sit here and have conversations for hours and hours and hours. But I think definitely we should have a part two for this.
Yeah, we definitely should have a part two. And it's Scorpio season, so I mean, we got to go deep into the depths of, the dark
Yes.
shadow, the fear, the taboos. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, whoever's ready, I shuffle until a card falls out. So, if you have a card before I receive mine, go for it.
Okay, let me see. I'm just gonna pull off the top. All right, so I'm using the Oracle deck by Dreamy Moons called Bloom by Annie Tarasova. And the card that I'm pulling is Seeds. And I'll read that one. It's number 22. And these are just things that this is just a message that we feel like these are messages that we need for the next for the new moon coming up and just the next week and into the season. So 22 seeds. Plant your seeds of intentions, ideas, and plans into the fertile, rich earth. Think them up, speak them out loud, and write them down. Visualize what you desire. The universe is ready to give as soon as you make up your mind about what it is that you actually want. Take the time to set your intentions and watch the magic happen as they begin to sprout right in front of your eyes. Just make sure that you're able to differentiate your seeds from those thrown into your mind's garden by other people. Ask yourself, what am I planting today? So I love that. I feel like especially the act of intentions and watching the magic happen, it pertains to me, it hits me right in the dream work area. Like that's where I personally really want to throw my seeds. More so, just continuously putting more energy and effort into this topic. But also I think that this message of make sure what you want is actually what you want and not what you think others want for you, because you're not going to be happy with accomplishing goals that other people set for you, even if it's not intentionally set for you by them, but it's what you think they want you to do. You're not going to feel the satisfaction. You have to do what's right for you. And sometimes it takes doing a lot of shadow work to figure out what that even is.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I got like really intense with that, but I want to make sure that you're doing things for you and not for other people. It's really important.
All right, I'm going to take mine from the top too, just to be in theme. Ooh, I just saw this card recently. So I am reading from the Witch's Oracle. So 'tis the season of the witch. And we received Chalice with fertility.
Ooh.
There you go. It's got
Oh, that's a
pine,
beautiful card.
rainbow, a watery stream, a dove. So it definitely feels like renewal and abundance.
I was
And
just going to say abundance. I
yeah.
saw everything going towards that chalice and I was like, oh my gosh.
And this is card number 3. I feel, Mary, if you're here, I know you probably love this card. You're resonating with all of that, especially the rainbows, the number 3. Okay, so with this deck, they also note a vibration, and usually it's like with the chakra. This one in particular is the sacral chakra. And the keywords are fertility, healing, and harmony. Chalices represent the water element, feelings and emotions, and the psychic and intuitive aspects of life. They also represent fertility on all levels. The chalice is used to honor the goddess. The most famous chalice is the legendary Holy Grail, thought by some to represent the bloodline of Christ in the womb. Chalice indicates that this is a time to go with the flow, to experience your cup being filled with the gifts that water brings. This may well be an emotional charged time, a time of intensity of feelings, but as a healing card, Chalice suggests that now is the time to let the flow of life wash over your emotions, to prepare the ground for fertility and growth. Consider what is contained within the vessel of your being and how you can best heal yourself or others around you. Take note of your dreams. Take note of your dreams. It literally says this, and listen to water. This is a positive card to receive if you're curious about a new project, a relationship, or situations involving a child. So, on a high note, this represents you are the vessel for divine grace to fill. And on a low note, it mentions embody what you would like to become. So, how well do both of our cards go together? Like the seed
They are
and
absolute,
the
even
chalice.
just like the seeds, the fertilizer, the growth, like it all, it's like, and in order to like, the card that I pulled is planting the seeds, where the card you pulled is like fertilizing and watching it grow and heal, and that's just so beautiful. I love this pull for everybody.
Yeah, I think this is right on point. There's not much more to say. Mary says, we're pregnant with our new life. I feel that. And then she also mentions between the two pools, the seed took and fertility delivers as a time of the new era. Stay focused and manifest, manifest.
Yep.
Perfect. Wow. This is a good way to, wrap this up, especially coming into the darkness of this Scorpio new moon and Halloween. I'm so excited that the moon is going to be dark on Halloween. I'm like, Scorpio.
So beautiful. I love it so much.
Oh, so beautiful, so intense. I love it. So dramatic. And but with this oracle too, it's like there's so much here. And like, yes, we're coming into a new moon, a new cycle. So write your dreams, everyone. It literally said it in the book. And
Yes, you have to pay attention to your dreams. It told you.
you write down your intentions, your desires, what you want to manifest, like your dreams in like that sense, and your dreams in your dreams.
Yep.
Going up.
Your waking dreams and your sleeping dreams.
Yes, yes. Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, for listening. We will be back this coming Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern time for this live podcast episode, for the next live podcast episode. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're listening on Spotify, please follow us on Spotify so you can be notified when our next episode has been uploaded and ready to go. So thank you. Any other last words, Alexis?
I just wanted to say, everybody have a happy Samhain. Um, Lots of protection, lots of abundance coming your way, and lots of downtime and going deep within yourself. And I just hope that it is beautiful and not so scary.
Same. I echo that. And happy new moon. Happy Halloween.
Yes, and happy new moon.
All right. We done. Okay.
We're done.